Okay, for people joining this live stream, this is a continuing discussion about how to handle historical geography. So let's recall what we did last time. Handling polygons and date intervals and time series. Okay, can somebody summarize what we concluded about each of these things?
That for now we will output a time series with the timestamps and hold from left. For now, we don't have a way to actually say until when that is valid, and the workaround is to add a last missing value.
Okay, but the plan for that is that we're introducing a. What is the plan for that? Can you remind me, please? Can you remind me? We discussed this last time. Do I have to pull out my notes? Who's project managing here?
I am Ben H.
Okay, can you remind me where I put my notes, please?
Let me check my notes from last time.
Okay, because that's kind of what we need when we're going to do one of these meetings. I don't want to be repeating myself. Okay, I pulled it up myself. Thank you. Okay. All right, I got it now, so you don't need to do anything here. Could you put yourself on mute so we're not hearing grinding noise? Okay, so can you remind me what we had concluded about date spans and so on? We had a new construct, as I recall, that represents the thing we need for this historical country case, correct?
Yeah, so the proposal, one of the strongest proposals was to actually have these date intervals as, let's say, left-hand side of the time series. And well,
right. Okay, fine. Then that's what we should plan on doing. So that the time series group knows that, and that's a project that we're going to proceed on, right? Is that correct? Hey, come on.
Gosha here. Yes. We'll think of and discuss the design. Yes.
Okay, but I mean, we need to come up with conclusions in these meetings. We're not just doing this for the sake of discussing things, right? So that was a conclusion from last time. And Ben, can you please write a summary of these and send it out to everybody?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, and make sure we have one from, so we don't seem to have that from last time. That's what I would have expected to see in the notebook this time. Okay?
Understood.
Okay. Okay, what did we think we solved here? What did we do here?
Not only that, we decided to actually use the largest polygon for when you don't specify any date or something like that.
Fine. Okay. All right. Using date intervals are all in geographics. Okay, so this was the thing where we were going to use different opacity levels, correct?
Right.
Okay. Seems kind of cool. But I think people are going to want that. That was another thing we discussed, right? What happened with that discussion of being able to list things this is some kind of weighted geographics where you could in principle list something. It's similar to geo-region value plot, if I'm not mistaken, right? But where you are you're weighting particular polygons, right? Do you remember what I'm talking about? We talked about it last time.
Yes, about having some kind of borders, etc. But I think this is a simpler proposal of having actually treat this dated all, which will return eventually a time series, to treat that as the list of all the values. And this is what will happen.
Okay, but then geographics of a time series is going to do what?
It's going to extract all the values from the time series and plot them together.
And because this weighting mechanism, okay.
There is no need to weighting mechanism because right now it already has some opacity, so it's like implicit this.
No, I understand. But if the time interval was, it lasted for 1,000 years in this form, and then there was 5 years in this form, you obviously want to weight the 1,000-year one.
Oh, I see. To split the opacities in such a way that it will be weighted.
Yep. Yes, that's right. right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. Right now, if time series of a bunch of geographics, of polygons, it's interpreted as the list of the polygons.
Okay, but I think that's wrong.
Yeah, it's, yes.
I mean, I think we, independent of geographics, we might want to do that for other purposes too. I mean, I don't even know, should we have some version of graphics or something that does that? Am I making sense? Okay, so the issue there is time series of polygons, graphics of time series of polygons. Am I making sense?
Yep.
So I don't know what graphics, I mean, other than straight graphics, what else would we expect to have work in a certain way? So for example, if I say, if I were to say list plot of a time series, what should I expect to happen there? I mean, it's, one might be led to think that graphics of a time series might produce things of different densities. What is the mechanism for doing that?
It's difficult to represent the flow of time, to know what came first.
It's very difficult. I don't think that's, I mean, and in this way of doing it, but what I'm saying is, in addition to geographics, don't we want to be able to have this capability, that is a time series where a time series of polygons or a time series of graphics objects, I mean, or more generally, time series of graphics objects.
So last time we were discussing this idea of the world tube.
Yes. Which we don't have any notes about. Do we have notes from the previous meeting?
Yes, I have the notes I took in the last meeting and sent out to everyone else in this meeting. I can forward them to you if you'd like.
Please do that.
Yes.
That's what we generally should start from in these meetings. Okay, go ahead.
Because I wonder if what we will need is a way to convert this time series object into a weighted list in general that could be used by any other function.
Yes, well, that would be a reasonable general way to do it. Okay, so hold on. Let's talk about essentially what we're talking about is geodate list plot 3D or something. That's the thing that would generate the world tube.
I won't use the 3D because that sounds like we are going to do a globe.
To do what?
To do a globe of the world.
I know, but usually things which produce 3D output end in 3D.
Could be, but yeah.
Okay, but so now what you're suggesting is general way of converting time series to weighted lists, right? So in other words, we have a particular value. So how would you do that, Gosha? Right now, if I make a time series and I say, well, I see, right now we don't really have, I mean, we could have a hold from left version of this. Am I making sense? Do you understand what I'm saying, Gosha?
Well, kind of. And so you could look at the timestamps, take the difference, and then that's gonna give you the intervals between the, the duration.
Right, exactly. So
and then convert that to, to the rules with the values in that way. What you're now doing, it's another way to create time series from the assignments. So it's
no, but what I'm saying is, how do we get a histogram? How do we get? I mean, so if I say histogram of this, right, I will get those values, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand this.
You need a date histogram if we have dates, for example.
No, but this doesn't have dates. But what I'm saying is, what we're doing here is we're getting the two look, if I do here 70 arrow 10, okay? Yeah, I don't understand this at all. I don't understand this at all. I mean, this is saying that go ahead.
Can you add another repeated value? Because what it does, it takes the histogram on the values. So if you do, for example, I don't know, 4 goes to 10. You should see some difference.
Okay, but that's not doing what I wanted it to do at all. Okay, fine. But what I want this to do is I want to find out this time series. If I do a date list plot of that time series, right? Oh, wow. That's really funky. Okay. Okay, I understand. That makes some sense. Okay, so what I want to know is, weighted by how long I'm in each state, what is the probability distribution of the values? Do you understand what I'm saying? Right?
Yes. Yeah, I know you different frequency.
But I mean, so if I were to do this as date intervals here, or a hold from left time series, right? What I would want is that the 10 here, well, whatever it is, I don't know how the time series is working, but it goes up to, okay, so by the time so the value 10 will have a much higher probability than these other values. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Because that's what we're trying to do here. What we're doing here is we're showing a density, we're showing a distribution, we're showing in opacity the probability that this particular point is in the set. Am I making sense? So here, what we want is the probability distribution of values weighted by how long that value was persisting in the time series. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we do that? I think we're going to need something to do that, because otherwise we're going to have this really weird singular case of the geographics situation that's different from these other ones. Right? Yeah. I mean, you understand?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm just, I see your problem. I'm just thinking of ways of resolving that, whether something of that sort already exists.
Yeah, I that's what I was wondering too.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go ahead.
No, yes, I put in the chat so that the time series could be converted into this weighted data wrapper that we already have, for example. And there the problem will be the right-hand limit, for example. Something like
What
that.
What does that even mean?
So the weighted data is the values and the weight for each value.
Oh, you mean the whole thing? Yeah, I get it. Yes. I agree that's a reasonable thing to imagine doing. What does this actually mean with weighted data here?
The values and then the weights.
So these are the weights. Yeah, okay.
The differences between the timestamps, yes.
Right. Right. I mean, this is a distribution of values. So what is the thing that normally would give a distribution of values? It's essentially bin counts, isn't it? For a generic, if I'm not mistaken, or what is it? I mean, this is giving the probability that.
But it's gonna give you according to the bins. So you're gonna have this partition.
Yeah, which is horrible.
According
so what you actually want is right here, okay? So here there are two spaces. Where, there's the sort of vertical, there's the color space, which is the value of this probability distribution. And then there's the sort of base space, which is the graphics here. Right? So what I could imagine is a time series. I mean, I could imagine another case, and maybe this is even more general than time series. I don't know, but I think it particularly applies to time series. So if I say 2, 5, 6,4, whatever, then eventually, then what I could do is I could say, as a function of this value, I want to know the distribution of this value. Seth on the live stream is commenting on empirical distribution, but I don't think that quite does what we want, does it?
But it kind of does. I'm just looking at that too. So, or you can apply this to time series.
And what does it do? That's interesting. Okay. So if I say,
You can do plot of the CDF of that.
why am I doing CDF? Why isn't it PDF?
Because it's point. It has the jumps. So the PDF would be just almost be 0 almost everywhere. And X goes, say, from the X to 70, 0 to 70.
Okay. I think that's more or less what we want, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's very good. Now, does it do the right thing here with respect to the hold from left business and so on? Or is it assuming? It's obviously not assuming. So this picture has interpolated variation from one time to the next, but this picture assumes there is no interpolation.
Correct, because it's on the values.
No, but look, but the values here, there are intermediate values shown in that plot. I don't think this is consistent. All right, let's not get stuck on this for right now. That we should think about that. But this overall behavior looks fairly sensible to me.
So just to comment, the CDF there, it just assumes it's a piecewise constant, while in a date list plot, it actually plots points and then connects them. So you can
I see what you're saying. The
definition is different. You plot the piecewise function, and so it knows to just give you the flat intervals there.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so what you're claiming is that this empirical distribution thing will more or less give us what we want here. So how does empirical distribution relate to the Roman Empire here? So if I'm saying, if I've got a time series of polygons for the Roman Empire, and I say empirical distribution of that, what on earth am I getting? I mean, what it should be giving me is what should it be? I mean, one thing it could give me is the length of time that a point on the Earth was in the Roman Empire. The distribution of lengths of time that a point on the Earth was in the Roman Empire. Right? Am I correct? Right, that's the analog here, yes? Is that correct, or am I missing something? That's the analog of this case. That's giving me the empirical distribution of the values in this time series, weighted by how long that value was maintained.
Yes.
Correct? So here, this should give me, for every geopoint, which is the analog of a value here, it should give me the distribution of the length of time, that point was in the Roman Empire. Is that true?
So you could imply that, but I'm not sure that will be directly taken from that, because what we have as values are the polygons. So we could test in which of these polygons this point was, for example, and see then. So I mean, the values are not exactly the points. So we will need
Fair enough.
to
But so
create some
what's
kind
the analog of this? I mean, this is like a bivariate distribution where as a function of lat long, just like if I have a bivariate Gaussian or something, I mean, in other words, one question would be if I were to compare okay, so here's a typical type of thing. How similar is the growth of the Roman Empire to a Gaussian or something, to a so that's a question that we should be able to answer, because we should be able to have an empirical distribution. I assume that in spatial statistics you will be able to do that, but then we've got to compare. Do you get what I'm saying?
So right now I'm feeling that we're confusing time and space. So one thing is you cross-section for a given point, and you can ask the question in time, right? And then, for example, we could ask the question, if this point belonged to the dated polygon of the Roman Empire, and have it for a given point. And then for the spatial case, it is it's slightly different problem. Because if you have a given point, you may ask if the point nearby, what's the probability for a point nearby to also belong to the Roman Empire?
Fair enough. Okay, those are different questions. I agree.
There are different questions,
but what I'm saying is that, look, compressing time to get just a probability is one thing. Okay, you're discussing also the purely spatial case, but compressing time to get a probability, like for instance, it could be that, from Rome as a center, it doesn't look like it's the case, but from Rome as a center, that the distribution of times that a given place spent in the Roman Empire was roughly Gaussian distributed with Rome as a center, for example. Obviously not true based on what we see here, but that's something you could imagine being the case, where probability is determined by what fraction of the time. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, but that's where we talk about the points. So
yes.
for a given space location, you could figure out, in the given time frame, what was probability that the point was in the Roman Empire based on how long the given point was in the Roman Empire.
Yes. But I'm just saying, how would we actually do that?
because anyway, that point will be split along different polygons, of course, of these different polygons we have in the time series. So yes, you are converting somehow the
I know. I'm trying to get. Look, I'm trying to get this function. Okay, you've got a nice picture here. Okay, another way to put it is, you've got a nice picture here, but what if I actually want to compute this function I want to know what is this value for, for Edinburgh. Okay. Yeah. So that's another question, right? Is what is the length of time Edinburgh, which I probably can't even spell. Oh my gosh, it doesn't have various pieces in there. Was in the Roman Empire, right? How would you answer that question? Or what is the time interval? What are the time intervals, date intervals, in which it is included? You get what I'm asking?
I'm thinking that in the same way that we have a geo group, I wonder whether we could have some sort of time group in which we have the polygons, and then we can ask this sort of question.
What is a geo group? What do you mean a geo group?
Geo group is what we use in order to, it's a bit like a geo union. It's a geo union of we can use entities or directly the polygons themselves. And then we will put them together, and the area will be the sum of the areas, etc.
I don't remember this. When did we put this in? Did we document this?
Sure, since the very beginning of geographics.
Yes, because we created that even before entity group. So that's why, because we needed that.
Okay, so if I were to say then geogroup of, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure.
What geogroup of NYC LA? So I could say that population. Is that correct? Oh, for goodness sake.
Not really. We use it.
It says treat multiple geo objects as a single group for purposes of computation. So why doesn't that work?
Graphical computation so far.
What's that?
It's graphical computation, graphical computation only for the moment. So your group is not, you are using entity value here. So your group is understood by, I wonder whether entity group would work there. Okay, can you change your group by entity group?
I'll try that. Yes, beautifully. So why do we need a geo group different from entity group?
Well, it pre-existed first, and then entity group is not, for example, entity group would not accept 2 polygons, while geogroup does.
What did that just do?
It's computing the minimal distance from London to those 2.
I see.
So geocomputation treats them as the union. That's the point. And you can also put explicit polygons there, which is different from entity group.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so what are you suggesting, Jose?
I was trying to find a time, in the same way that this geogroup is spatial joining, I was trying to find some sort of temporal joining of things so that they form a single unity.
Yeah.
I haven't thought too much about it.
Yeah, okay, all right. But I mean, this type of question to show what are the data intervals in which, I mean, what would we think that, how would we think that would look? So first question is, okay, is something, let's take Roman Empire as a thing. And now I want to know, is Edinburgh in the Roman Empire? How do I find that out? Geo member, what is the appropriate thing to ask if something is in this?
Geo within Q.
I'm sorry?
Geo within Q.
Thank you. Okay, so geo within Q, then of this, comma, Los Angeles, better give false. What? Okay, what's going on?
All this is about adding the support for in geo within Q and all these functions to the historical polygons, which right now we don't have.
Okay, fair enough. All right, okay, fine. So that should work. Okay, so then the question is, what is the time series analog of geo within Q? Right? And we almost want something which is almost like, I'm making this up in a very weird way, but let's imagine it was something like this. Oops.
By the way, this discussion is exactly what we are adding in the notebook as next section.
Oh, okay, fine. All right, okay. But you get the idea of something like this, right?
So you could do this because that the Roman Empire, if that comes as a time series, right? We could go over all the polygons with the geo within Q.
Yes.
That could be mapped that way. I mean, this syntax is incorrect, but
yeah, I understand. Okay.
So the idea is that if you input a time series or a dated all or a dated and a date interval, that will be converted into the time series, and then we will output a time series. In that case, that's a proposal.
Okay, so hold on. Let's look at that. Okay. Oh, wow. Good for you. Okay. Does this work right now? Oh, I see. It does with polygon.
No. Yeah, with the polygon, of course, it works because it's a specific polygon.
Right. Good. I agree. That's exactly how that should work. Yes, I think that's right. I mean, I'm a little concerned about whether everything should have the same default polygon. Geo within Q, probably.
Yeah, I feel like we should use the same default most extended polygon in all the cases. Maybe that will be more uniform, and maybe use the dated all or some kind of dated union maybe to specify the whole union. And that's where Jose was proposing maybe to have a different wrapper to have this time group.
What about Giovannians? Could we use Giovannians?
Instead of dated, I think so. Yes.
I think this is crazy. I mean, I think this is really weird to have a Q function return a time series. Although we are painting ourselves into a little bit into that corner.
Right, because somehow the Q function already returns a list. So the time series will be this extended list, actually.
Well, when does the Q function return a list?
Well, your within Q returns a list when you compare lists because it works like an outer. That
Oh
was
boy.
the
Is that a good idea?
well, we wanted your within Q to be listable. That's the point. So we created your within Q to be listable.
Arguably, it shouldn't have had a Q at the end.
Yeah, that's something that maybe we added after.
Maybe we should have a version of it without the Q at the end.
I think other functions. I'm just trying something like even Q, and on a list it will list itself through.
Really? You are correct. Okay, well then.
Yes, I think we follow with that. when
Okay, all right,
the
okay, fine. Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I agree that this isn't so crazy. Wow, what's this? Oh, I see. That's the withininess of that with two moving targets.
Right, that will be like the intersection of all the date intervals and create the true false of these intersections.
Right.
So that could be an interpretation. That's what we are asking here, if that's sensible or not.
So, but in this case, I mean, so it'll be some kind of hold from left time series. So that if you say, so wait a minute, if I want to index into a time series and find out the value for a specific time, what do I do, Gosha? Can I just do this and then index into that?
Not index, but give a date.
Let's say I say Jan 1st, 1948. Okay. Why does it do that as a date object there? Why doesn't it display with a date format? That's another separate bug. Is Nick here?
He's out today.
Can you please communicate that to him?
Yep.
Okay, so this is, okay, so that's what that works, right? Applying time series to a date will give the value at that date.
Yes.
Okay. Makes me wonder why a power series like this doesn't do that as well. Maybe I'm just crazy, but why wouldn't this? It's kind of crazy, I suppose. Is that crazy to have that work? Or maybe it's just crazy. I mean, power series is a very old function before we were really doing currying and things. Okay, that's a separate thing. Maybe you could ask Roger about that. Gosha, maybe that's for you.
Okay, it just doesn't seem to me that it's defined as a function.
Well, nor is time series.
Which the 1 plus x
No,
squared.
Time series. Why is that a function either? Yet it is applicable to a particular value, a particular x value, and returns a value. See what I'm saying?
Well, it's a defined object anyway, so we can add them these sub values and things.
Yeah, well, so is this an object actually? It's a series data object. Okay, well, maybe okay. Put that in ILD. We'll discuss it there. Okay. Ben, can you make sure that gets communicated?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now let's come back to this. So that's for within qubit. Asking this question, how long has a given point? What is the time series? Oh, I see. This is the time series of trues and falses. But now if I want to ask, what is the duration in that time series, right? So that appears to be a time series of trues and falses. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the idea. And then to get the duration of true, we will need this weighted data or something like that to get how long it was true, false, or...
Well, but actually, isn't it the case that just saying empirical distribution of this should give that result? But that doesn't show me, that's the distribution, as opposed to showing me for each, I'm so confused here. For each, for true and for false, what is their duration in here? Do you get what I'm asking?
I wonder if for that case, weighted data will be better because that's exactly that for each value and how much of that value.
I'm also wondering if duration could have a second argument. Doesn't duration work? Yeah, it does work on time series. What about having a second argument for duration? Gosha?
I don't know. This is not my design, so I cannot comment.
Okay, well, whose design is it?
That's gonna be the audio and signal processing team.
Okay, well, why don't you ask them?
But what would you want in the second thing?
For example, I could say duration of, in this time series, instead of that whole time series. So if I say duration of that whole time series, I'm going to get, that's kind of crazy. The units there are kind of crazy. But anyway, never mind. Okay, so now if I say that, comma, true, right, then what I want to get is the duration of true in that time series.
I see.
But now what I also might want is something like, how long has that time series been between -6 and 6? You see what I'm saying?
This is interesting. This is a bit like count, but
it is like count, yeah.
Continuous things.
Yeah, maybe we should have a different function for this because duration could be the right hand side could be will need to be very flexible, I think so.
Well, not if it's just counting the amount of time. So that the two things. Okay.
Well, sorry. Does it make sense for the other first arguments of duration?
I don't think it's completely stupid for them. I mean, you could say how long has some
frequency.
Yeah, I would think so. For what duration is the sound level above such and such? Now, I admit I'm not sure this is quite, probably the design is not quite right, but something like that. We have a comment from Brian on the live stream. Let's see. Polygon to get a list of date ranges. How much of the polygon was in the date ranges? Subdivision of the polygon until a specified percentage was in the Roman Empire. Oh boy. I don't think we can get a confidence for each interval, because I think that this is not a kind of data where we can give any reasonable error bounds. It's like 3 historical atlases said this, but Herodotus said that. I mean, it's just hard to know. Caesar claimed that he'd captured that part of Gaul, but actually everybody said he was, what would we give as the confidence for that? Okay. That looks beautiful. Is there a problem with this? That seems like a good thing to do here. Nations from the year 1500 located within that territory. That looks, well, that's interesting. GeoEntities. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. I would say yes by default. By default, this should include, well, floof. Yeah, I mean, yes, because each of these military conflicts has a point in time. Mountains don't have a point in time, they only have a point in space. Makes sense?
Now, for all these things that are queries with dated, do we return dated objects as well?
What do you mean?
The fact that we are inserting the date in the input, I wonder whether we should propagate it to the output. Because presumably the objects are also temporal objects.
I see what you're saying. So in other words, if you said dated historical country in 1500, should we return England in 1500 with a dated wrapper, as opposed to just returning England? Yeah, I think the answer is yes in that case. In the case where there's a right-hand side here that has a second argument with dated, I kind of agree with you that represents we are asking for the 1500 dated historical country. Whereas in this case, we're not asking for that. But what if the dated there... See, a military conflict is a point in time. A historical country is not.
Right. In a sense, it's like inserting dated of the entity type, comma, date in the first argument of entity, which should propagate the dated outside.
Yeah, actually, let me correct that on military conflict. I mean, the 100 Years' War, presumably, one could say this particular time in the 100 Years' War, although I'm not sure what we could do with that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I will think that we only add the dated when the input included the dated, actually. So that it was perfect.
Yeah, fair enough. But nevertheless, in this case, we would say we will only, the GeoEntities. See, for example, let me give you another example, okay? So, comets visible during the Roman Republic. Okay, how would we figure that out? So that is an analog of GeoEntities, but for time. See what I'm saying?
But in this case, probably the comets will have the date information themselves.
So, I mean, my whole point is that is during the time span of the Roman Republic, what comets were visible. So, I mean, that's potentially a different thing. Like for example, if I want to know, yeah, here's a question for if I want to know what spacecraft were launched in 1961, How do I do that? If I say spacecraft, that's not encouraging. Why doesn't that work? So that would turn into an entity class of spacecraft. Well, let's say satellites for now. And then that would say launch date. Why that isn't auto-completing, I have no idea. Can you please report that, Ben?
Yes.
And then let's say year 1961. Bah. Isn't there a launch date property?
There should be. That would be a data query parse. I'll look at that.
Okay, so there's that. So the question is, why doesn't this work? So, I mean, this whole class of things should be working.
Perhaps you need an entity list. I'm not sure that's been.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh my gosh, maybe it worked. Is that what you're saying? Maybe that actually worked.
Well, it did something perhaps that year.
No way. No way. Well, I mean, let's try. If we really wonder about that, we can try.
Oh, perhaps it's because the dates are given to the second, and it's exactly looking for that date.
Well, so wait a minute. Then how do we specify that that's supposed to be an interval?
I don't know. That would be. I don't know whether we can do that. Some sort of contains.
Yeah, I think that this is. I think what's happened here is that the way that this date property has got its value specified is wrong, because we're not dealing with date granularities properly here.
Right. I agree.
Okay. Okay, well, that's fairly civilized for that. Okay, geo-identify. What is this?
No, yes, but what I wanted to say is that I'm not always sure that we should have this by default, because how would you specify that you don't want this time correlation between the target and the source?
What?
So how will you specify I want all the military conflict using dated military conflict all? Would that be sensible to?
I mean, this is going to get quite weird. I mean, if you say this common military conflict and then you end up getting things in the Second World War, it's going to seem wrong. Well, okay, so that, okay.
So my question is, and how will you specify the other way? Because it's easier to specify.
Yeah, all military conflicts through history that occurred there. I think you'd say dated all.
Okay, no, that's fine. So only to know if
I think
dated
so.
all will...
I think that's right. Okay, geo-identify. Somebody's typing an area. Okay, why isn't this returning a time series? That's a mess. I think it should return a time series. Because geo-identify normally, okay, so if I were to say geo-identify here, just country, comma, Rome, I would get Italy. I'm confused why this doesn't return a time series in this case. What's this thing?
So in general, the identify returns a list of entities that are in that place, let's say. And you can also specify more elements in the first argument. So you could put, let's say, you could put country, alternative, administrative division, etc., for example. So we should also consider that the case that we are mixing stuff sometimes, or we can mix stuff. Yeah.
Did I misspell it? What's it called?
No, it should be an alternative, not a list.
Oh. Arguably, by the way, that error message should be better.
Yep. So,
okay.
So in that way, the idea is that historical country will also, so if you specify historical country, it will return the dated, the entity
What
instances.
the heck can you do with it? Those dated things. Let's say that I wanted to plot. What would I want to do? I want to give, I mean, if I give this, right, I doubt that this could be successfully used in timeline plot.
There may be even a bigger problem in the sense that if some functions are already returning time series for historical entity types, perhaps we cannot mix the historical entity types with the non-historical ones.
Okay, should this have given a, I mean, whatever this returns should be able to be fed to timeline plot. Shouldn't it? I mean, just like at the top here, these time series that we were dealing with, right? I should presumably be able to feed that to timeline plot. It's a little funky, but it's not obviously crazy, right? Okay, so what format does this need to be in so that I could feed it to timeline plot? And by the way, what happens if I do this? If I say time series of this and feed that to timeline plot? Ouch. Is that really right? Again, okay. Look, GeoIdentify should be returning something that can be fed to timeline plot, shouldn't it?
I'm not sure, because in general, that's a more general function. That's my point, that you could mix that different types, etc., in the left, in the first argument.
So what? Then it should give a timeline plot of all of those things. I'm just saying, whatever format this is, better be accepted by timeline plot. But I don't understand why it isn't a time series, or possibly multiple time series if it's also. Well, I don't understand why it isn't a time series, possibly with overlapping intervals.
I don't think we are able to do that, but
I thought we were. I thought it was the whole point of temporal data. Gosha, can you speak to that?
No, we cannot overlap. So the assumption is that you don't have multiple values on the same timestamp. So no, you can't, because then you have ambiguity. What does really happen on?
What happens in temporal data? Doesn't it do that?
In temporal data, you could give different paths. So it means that you could have, you have a different path, and then.
But it's the same timestamp.
No, the timestamps can be different for different paths. The only limitation is that you deal with the same dimensionality of the values. But I can give different timestamps for each path in temporal data.
Okay. But so why doesn't that achieve this? Why isn't that the same thing as this? let's have a quick look at the other issues here, okay? So, I mean, something has to be solved here. I don't think this is right. Again, I'm going to say it again. How would you use this output?
Well, so the idea there was to return an equivalent to entity instance, but with dated, which is the equivalent for entity instance with date attribute.
I see. Okay, well, maybe we should just make timeline plot accept that.
Because
It's a little weird because what's happening here. Oh, I see. No, go ahead. Go on. What were you saying?
Right, because the idea is that dated will be, it's already accepted by, for example, by geographics or by other functions or entity value.
Okay, all right, okay. You're beginning to convince me. So it's like entity instance then. And in fact, probably this is equivalent to an entity instance.
I think under the hood is the same. Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, again, I'm going to say it again. Timeline plot would need to support this then. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, probably. I don't know if that supports already, for example, entity instance with date attribute. Maybe that's something that should be
it should probably also be done. But that seems fairly straightforward.
What if you return an association?
Doesn't seem like a good idea. This seems like a better idea because each element here is semantically meaningful.
What would be the left-hand side of that association then?
Interval goes to Roman Kingdom.
Yeah, well, so that's very similar to what you would put inside a time series.
Yes, but that directly works with a timeline plot.
Fine, but it doesn't matter. We could get this to work with timeline plot. Because, as you say, no, in fact, that won't work because an association won't work because those intervals could be the same.
Right.
All right, let's keep going here. I think I'm now convinced that what you have there is reasonable. Okay, identify the historical country in which the Pyramid of the Sun was built. Okay. So when it was finished, geo-identify. Okay. What the heck is this? What is this?
So right now, to get that other result, that is the proposed syntax, we will need to do this thing. So that's what we are proposing now as new syntax, of course.
It seems very, very sensible to me. I mean, in general, this could be a time range here. Right? This could be a place with a time range. And there could be multiple. Okay, explain to me why this isn't returning TO. Is that a Peruvian empire? Well, whatever. How do you say that anyway?
Teotihuacan. No, it's not Peru.
Okay.
Mexico.
But Mexico. Okay. All right. In any case, this
maybe we should return also dated here. That's
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we are following that other standard.
I think we have to do that. Yeah.
So it will be clear that that existed on that specific date. Right.
We're going to end up needing a function that strips the dateds.
No, I think this would need a dated if historical country was wrapped in dated.
No, I don't think that's right because the convention up here was if the second argument has a dated thing around it.
But the arguments in geo-identify and geo-entities are flipped.
I see. Okay. All right. Okay. You convinced me. Okay. Buildings and historical sites built in the Roman Empire. Don't we have any more than that? That's really weird. That's so few. Don't you think that's really weird? It seems unconvincing.
I think that's because that's only the Roman Republic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that looks highly sensible to me. Yes, missing doesn't exist is what I think it should do. But this, by the time you've actually evaluated position, that is just a geoposition, right? So it no longer knows that it had anything to do with a particular date.
Right. Lost any information, any date information. That's right.
Right. So I think that first thing is correct there. I think the second thing should say, missing didn't exist, basically. I mean, we probably need a particular tag for the missing to represent this. Does that make sense?
A new missing argument for that kind of.
Yeah. I'm saying missing, not in existence.
Sounds kind of philosophical, but yeah.
What's that? Well, if you've got a better suggestion.
Yeah, we should think about that. Yeah.
Well, again, we have discussed in the past wrapping dated around geoposition, which would mean inserting the date inside the geoposition. So that's a possibility, propagating the dates through geoposition.
Yeah, but not in this case, because this case, the thing just didn't exist. Period, end of story.
Yeah, but the problem, Jose, I think in the first Florence Cathedral position is that you don't know. So it's a time interval, and geoposition right now cannot be fit with a time interval actually. So
Right.
it actually exists within a date interval.
But if that was year 1500 instead of minus.
Oh, for the second case. Yes, that could be, and that's where we should return the missing when we see that date is out of the valid date interval.
Mhm.
That's right.
That's an interesting function, this thing here. I don't like really the word event. It's not really an event. I mean, this isn't.
Yes, so here we start a really different discussion is how to treat lookups of dates.
Well, this is very interesting. This is clearly a good idea. To be able to say, I mean, I would have thought the more natural thing would be to say, so there are two issues. There's time and space here. Identify things of a particular category. Right, so geo-identify, we've now said it can deal with time and space by wrapping dated around things. But this is something where what we want to return, what do you expect to return here? I mean, don't you expect you might want to know, when were there military conflicts associated with Germany? This is asking for two things. Who are the leaders in such and such a time interval? But by the way, there needn't be any geo about it. It's actually surprising we haven't had this issue before. I mean, like what movies were made in the 1950s? So we can get that from an entity class query, right?
Right. I wonder if this function could be actually be a convenient function for a more complex entity class, implicit entity class.
I think so. I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's a sort of well, I think that it's a function that should actually resolve, and it should be able to ask what, just like we can ask with GeoIdentify, what, I mean, and there's also nearest, I suppose, as well. Like, what was the nearest, you're going to want to ask that. What was the nearest war? Yeah, I mean, which war? Oh boy, this is complicated. Okay, so imagine the following case. What war involved Belgium closest to 1300?
Yeah, that's indeed something we cannot do with entity class. Definitely.
I agree. Well, closest to, I'm not sure we can't do that with entity class. Unfortunately, I have to leave basically now. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm checking entity class can take between, and that's good for dates because you can put a beginning date and end date.
Right, yeah, but it doesn't resolve the
you guys could continue a bit, but I have to run. So we should continue this whole thing, but I think we're making really good progress here, and you should go ahead and start implementing these things you've already discussed. Make sense?
Okay.
But let's set up another meeting before we've all forgotten how this works. And next time, let's start with the notes from this meeting. Okay, I have to run. Sorry. Thanks, guys.
Right. Thanks.
See you. Okay. Bye.